says that poverty used to mean hunger, inadequate clothing, and inadequate protection against the elements. And that's what poverty was when Thomas Sowell and I were young. But it's not poverty today, is it, Tom?
Oh, good grief, no. I mean, most of the people who are below the official poverty line in the United States have color television, microwave ovens, and own either a car or a truck. Now, we didn't call that anything like poverty when I was growing up.
Oh, that's right. And in some cases, according to a study by the Heritage Foundation, I think 16% of people who are called poor, who fit the census definition as poor, 14 or 15% have 2 or more cars.
Oh, yes. When I was doing research, I found that hundreds of thousands of people with incomes below $20,000 a year live in houses costing $300,000 or more. Now, as of the time I discovered that, I was living in a house costing less than $300,000.
Now, I think that one of the wonderful things about your writing is that, well, you're saying some of these things that we observe in the United States are not unique to United States, and they're not by no means unique to Black Americans. And this book that you talk about in this particular column is called "Life at the Bottom" by what is it?
Theodore Dalrymple.
Dalrymple,
a doctor in a predominantly white, low-income neighborhood in England.
He's talking about the same kind of things about lower-class whites in England that we can say about the lower-class blacks and whites in the United States.
Yeah, and I think it may be easier for some people to understand what's really involved, because so much of what is done in the black community that's counterproductive is explained away as a legacy of slavery or Jim Crow and all that. And you see the exact same things happening in these lower-class white communities in England, where none of those things apply. One of the most striking is the beating up of children in school by their classmates when the children are trying to get a decent education. In fact, Dalrymple, as a doctor, has treated many of these kids because they need medical attention. They've been beaten up that badly. And when that happens in the United States, it's called they're accusing the black students who are trying to learn of acting white. Well, the whole racial thing is gone in these lower class white communities. So really, this is not something peculiar to the United States. It's what happens when you have a welfare state that allows people to live a counterproductive lifestyle, and that welfare state is accompanied by an ideology that accepts, apologizes for, even glorifies that lifestyle.
Also, we saw some of it in Britain during the riots of last summer.
Oh, yes. I love people who say these riots are a result of anger at poverty and so forth and so on. And there's never been so much anger as there is today when there's so little poverty.
That's right. And you see the rioters sometimes in designer clothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing back in the days when poor people were desperate and would steal bread. In all these riots that I know about, I have never seen anybody break into a bakery and steal bread.
They're stealing television sets and Xboxes and all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, there's another very interesting article that you have in your book called "The Older Budweiser." And it goes back to way back to the Habsburg Empire, where Czechs and Germans, people of Czech ancestry and people of German ancestry, speaking different languages, got along very, very well up until what?
Up until you got a rising class of Czech intellectuals who resented the fact that they had to learn German in order to get ahead. Now, this they blamed on the Germans, but they should blame it on history. The fact is that the Western European nations had written languages centuries before most of the Eastern European nations, mainly because the Romans conquered Western Europe and brought Roman letters. It was centuries later before they began to have letters for the languages of Eastern Europe. Well, what that meant was that if you wanted to learn, science or any serious subject, you had a better shot at it if you learned some Western European language, in this case German, rather than be confined to the local language.
And the Czech intellectuals started telling the Czechs in Budweis, saying there had to be cultural identity.
That is really locking people in a blind alley. I mean, we call it multiculturalism today. To me, multiculturalism is like the caste system. It means it confines you to where you happen to have been born, regardless of how many opportunities there are in the world for you to advance by learning something else beyond where you were born.
Yeah, right. And we see that in the United States as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's led by the intelligentsia in our country on college campuses. They even have vice presidents for diversity.
Oh, gosh. Oh, yes.
I mean, spending millions of dollars all over the country at universities by having all these nonsense offices that did not exist yesteryear.
That's true, but the vast amount of money that they waste is really the least of it. What they really waste that's more valuable is the time of the students who, after all, are young and inexperienced. They may think it's wonderful to sit around and rap about racial issues or glass ceilings and all that kind of stuff. But none of that is going to allow them to have a marketable skill when they leave that institution. And this is the problem. This is the problem in a number of countries, not just in the Habsburg Empire, but around the world and into the present time. That wherever you have a newly arising intelligentsia from some group that is poorer, they typically specialize in the softer subjects. They do not learn science, math, medicine, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. They learn all kinds of stuff that's much easier. And then when they get out into the world and discover there's absolutely no demand for that kind of stuff, then they become identity merchants.
I think it's one of the things that you're to be complimented on in the sense that you bring an international perspective to many of these problems that we face as a nation. That is, affirmative action is not only a disaster in the United States, but it's a disaster in India. It's been a disaster everywhere it's been tried, in Sri Lanka and all these other places. And I think that we gain something if we recognize that, these problems, these social problems or economic problems, are not unique to any particular culture.
Oh, absolutely. And most of the countries where they've pushed preferential policy for one group, they argue as if what's something peculiar to that particular country is the reason. For example, in New Zealand, they say, there's the Treaty of Waitangi in 1843, and that's why the Maoris deserve preferential treatment. And here it's another rationale. In India, it's another. But whatever the rationale, the patterns are just painfully similar.
That's right. And a scientist would not go from New York to London and saying, well, the law of gravity operates differently in London because of because of the Roman conquest.
Yes.